Welcome to a journey most people never take. Across America, in cemeteries large and small, rest some of the most beloved faces in the history of film and television. Names you know, voices you remember. Yet their graves sit quiet now, seldom visited. Today, we're going to change that. We'll visit 10 actors who once lit up the screen, hear their stories one more time, and pay our respects at resting places the world seems to have forgotten. Let's begin where so many Hollywood stories begin and end, at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in Los Angeles. In the Cathedral Mausoleum, down a dim corridor, you'll find a niche belonging to one of the most distinctive screen presences of the 20th century. Peter Lorre was the man with the sad eyes and the whispery voice, the one who could make you uneasy just by standing in a doorway. Born Laszlo Lowenstein in what is now Slovakia, he fled Europe as the Nazis rose to power, but not before delivering a performance that changed cinema. In Fritz Lang's 1931 thriller M, Lorre played a child killer hunted through the streets of Berlin, and his portrayal was so disturbingly human that it made him an international name overnight. Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with him at first, so they put him in a series of Mr. Moto detective films and let him play variations on Menace. Then came The Maltese Falcon in 1941, where he played the perfumed and untrustworthy Joel Cairo opposite Humphrey Bogart. A year later, he appeared in Casablanca, lurking around Rick's Cafe with stolen letters of transit. Those two films alone would be enough to earn anyone a permanent place in movie history. Lorre's breathy, insinuating delivery was so widely imitated that Warner Brothers animators modeled cartoon characters after him, and impressionists never tired of the voice. His friend and frequent co-star Vincent Price delivered the eulogy at Lorre's funeral in 1964. Lorre had suffered a stroke at home, still in his pajamas. He was 59 years old. His ashes were placed here in Hollywood Forever, in a corridor most visitors walk right past without noticing. Our next stop takes us far from California to a mausoleum in Dayton, Ohio. It's an unlikely resting place for a Hollywood legend, but Agnes Moorehead was never one to follow expectations. If you grew up watching Bewitched, you know her instantly. She played Endora, the imperious and wickedly funny witch mother who could never quite accept that her daughter Samantha had married a mortal. But Moorehead's career stretched far beyond that single role, and she bristled when interviewers reduced her to it. She was one of Orson Welles' most trusted players, a charter member of his Mercury Theater Company. Her film debut was as Charles Foster Kane's cold, pragmatic mother in Citizen Kane. The following year, she earned her first Academy Award nomination for The Magnificent Ambersons, playing the anguished spinster Aunt Fanny. 3 more Oscar nominations would follow for Mrs. Parkington, Johnny Belinda, and Hush. Hush, Sweet Charlotte. She never won the statuette, but she collected a Golden Globe, an Emmy for a guest appearance on The Wild Wild West, and 6 Emmy nominations for Bewitched. Her range was extraordinary. In one of the most celebrated Twilight Zone episodes, The Invaders, she performed almost entirely in pantomime, holding the screen by herself with barely a word of dialogue. Moorehead died of uterine cancer in 1974 at the age of 73, and was brought back to Ohio for burial alongside her family. Dayton had been her father's last pastoral assignment. He was a Presbyterian minister, and she had kept a farm nearby for much of her life. She rests in the Abbey Mausoleum at Dayton Memorial Park, a quiet place that sees very few visitors looking for Endora. Back now to Hollywood Forever, where we step outdoors and cross the grounds toward a modest flat marker that most cemetery visitors never find. This is the grave of Carl Switzer, the boy the world knew as Alfalfa. If you grew up watching Our Gang, or caught the reruns under the name The Little Rascals, you remember the cowlick, the freckles, and those hilariously off-key serenades. Carl and his older brother Harold wandered into the Hal Roach Studios cafeteria during a family vacation and launched into a song and dance routine right there among the lunch tables. Producer Hal Roach signed them on the spot. By the late 1930s, Alfalfa had become the most popular character in the series. But when you peak at 12, the rest of life has a hard time measuring up. As an adult, Switzer struggled to find work. He had small parts here and there. You can spot him briefly in It's a Wonderful Life, and his last credited role was as an extra in Cecil B. DeMille's The 10 Commandments. He turned to bartending and dog breeding to get by. On January 21, 1959, Switzer went to the home of a man named Bud Stilts to collect a $50 debt related to a lost hunting dog. A confrontation escalated into violence, and Stilts shot Switzer. A judge ruled it justifiable homicide. Carl Switzer was 31. His death went almost unnoticed in the papers the next day. Cecil B. DeMille had died the same afternoon, and his obituary dominated the front pages. Switzer's parents arranged for his grave marker here at Hollywood Forever to include an image of a dog. It's not Petey from our gang, as some assume. It's a treeing walker coonhound, one of Carl's own hunting dogs from his adult life. Heading south from Los Angeles now, to the city of Anaheim and a small memorial park called Melrose Abbey. This is where the original Morticia Addams rests, not in a cobwebbed mausoleum as the character might have preferred, but in a crypt shared with her mother. Carolyn Jones made Morticia Addams a television icon in 1964, bringing sly elegance and deadpan wit to a role that cartoonist Charles Addams himself had personally endorsed. The character's signature black dress was so tight that Jones could barely walk, and she told interviewers it took 20 minutes to peel off at the end of each day. But the show only lasted 2 seasons, and after that, the typecasting was merciless. Directors could only see Morticia when they looked at her. What gets lost in the Addams family fame is that Jones had a serious dramatic career before the show. She earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for The Bachelor Party in 1957 and won a Golden Globe as Most Promising New Actress. She appeared in Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much and the groundbreaking miniseries Roots. In 1981, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. Rather than step away, she took on a role in the soap opera Capital, sometimes performing from a wheelchair. She married her longtime boyfriend Peter Bailey Britton, knowing her time was short. Jones died in August 1983 at 53. Before she died, she donated her Morticia costume and wig to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Her sister later said Carolyn wanted her epitaph to be, "She gave joy to the world." Let's return to Los Angeles, this time to the Hollywood Hills and Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Here lies a man whose face was his fortune, sharp as a hatchet, with piercing eyes that seemed to belong to 2 different centuries. Lee Van Cleef spent a decade playing forgettable heavies before an Italian director changed everything. His very first film role was in High Noon in 1952. He played one of the outlaws at the train station, without a single line of dialogue. For years, it was more of the same. Snarling gunfighters and one-note villains on shows like Bonanza and Gunsmoke. His career was fading when Sergio Leone cast him in for A Few Dollars More in 1965, followed by The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Overnight, at 40, Van Cleef became an international star. In Leone's films, his angular face wasn't a liability. It was the whole point. He was the bad in that famous 3-way showdown at the cemetery, squinting across the dust at Clint Eastwood and Eli Wallach, and audiences in Europe made him a bigger star than he had ever been at home. Before any of that, Van Cleef had served in the Navy during World War II, assigned to the minesweeper USS Incredible. His ship swept mines in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, and by the time of his discharge in 1946, he held the rank of Sonarman First Class and had earned the Bronze Star. He continued working in films right up until the end, despite heart trouble that required a pacemaker. Van Cleef died of a heart attack in December 1989 at the age of 64. Not far from Hollywood in Culver City stands Holy Cross Cemetery, one of the Catholic faith's great resting places in Southern California. Among the names here, and there are many, is Mary Astor, an actress whose personal life once threatened to swallow her career whole, and whose talent refused to let it. Astor started in silent films as a teenager, mentored by John Barrymore. She survived the transition to talkies, survived the death of her first husband in a plane crash, and survived a custody battle in 1936 that nearly ended her career. Her ex-husband introduced her private diary in court, detailing an affair with playwright George S. Kaufman in language the tabloids could barely print. The studio heads assumed she was finished. 5 years later, she played the treacherous Bridget O'Shaughnessy in The Maltese Falcon, lying to Humphrey Bogart with such cool composure that the performance remains one of film noir's finest. That same year, she won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for The Great Lie. In 1941, Mary Astor won an Oscar and appeared in one of the greatest detective films ever made, just 5 years after Hollywood had counted her out. She continued working for 2 more decades, appearing in Meet Me in St. Louis and alongside Bette Davis in Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Later in life, she became a published novelist and wrote 2 well-regarded memoirs. Astor spent her final years at the motion picture country home in Woodland Hills. She died of respiratory failure in 1987 at 81. We return once more to Hollywood Forever Cemetery, our 3rd visit today, which tells you something about how many stories are gathered in this one place. Near the front of the grounds lies Darren McGavin. If that name doesn't ring a bell, his face certainly will. Every December, when A Christmas Story plays on an endless loop, McGavin is there as the old man, Ralphie's grumbling, profanity-muttering, leg-lamp-loving father. The film was a modest release in 1983 and has since become one of the most watched holiday movies in American history. But McGavin had been a working actor for 3 decades before that role found him. In the 50s, he co-starred with Frank Sinatra in The Man with the Golden Arm and with Gary Cooper in The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell. On television, he starred as Mickey Spillane's detective Mike Hammer and played the lead in Riverboat. Then came the role that cult television fans revere, Carl Kolchak in The Night Stalker. The 1972 TV movie, in which McGavin played a rumpled reporter tracking a vampire through Las Vegas, became the highest-rated made-for-television movie of its time. Chris Carter, the creator of The X-Files, has openly credited Kolchak as the direct inspiration for his show. McGavin's early life reads like something out of Dickens. His parents divorced when he was a boy, and the young McGavin ran away from a foster situation, eventually living under a wharf in San Francisco before finding his way to acting school. He died of cardiovascular disease in February 2006 at the age of 83. A short drive west brings us to one of the most star-studded 2 acres in all of Los Angeles, Westwood Village Memorial Park, wedged between office buildings in the heart of Westwood. Most visitors come for Marilyn Monroe's crypt. Far fewer notice the unmarked grave nearby. George C. Scott lies here without a headstone, without an inscription, without any indication that one of the most ferocious talents in the history of American acting is resting a few steps from the sidewalk. Scott won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his towering portrayal of General George S. Patton in the 1970 film Patton, and refused to accept it. He had warned the Academy months in advance, calling the ceremony a 2-hour meat parade, and arguing that acting performances could not be ranked. It was a principled stand, delivered with the same volcanic intensity he brought to everything. Before Patton, he had already earned 3 Oscar nominations, for Anatomy of a Murder, The Hustler, and the darkly comic doctor Strangelove, in which he played the war-happy General Buck Turgidson. After Patton, he delivered a definitive Ebenezer Scrooge in the 1984 television film A Christmas Carol. He served in the Marine Corps in the closing months of World War II and studied journalism at the University of Missouri before switching to drama. Scott was intense, unpredictable, and by many accounts difficult to work with. His co-star Maureen Stapleton once told a director she was scared of him, and Mike Nichols replied, "My dear, everyone is scared of George C. Scott." He died of a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm on September 22, 1999, at 71. That his grave bears no marker feels like a final act of defiance from a man who never wanted the fuss. Now we leave California altogether for the rolling farmland of Carroll County, Maryland, and a tiny churchyard cemetery behind Sandy Mount United Methodist Church in Finksburg. There are no maps, no signs, and no headstone to guide you. Somewhere in the grass near the back of this cemetery lies Fred Gwynne, Herman Munster himself. Gwynne stood 6'5" with a booming bass baritone voice that could shake the walls. On the Munsters, from 1964 to 1966, he wore 50 pounds of padding, makeup, and platform boots to become television's most lovable Frankenstein's monster. Before that, he had played Officer Francis Muldoon on Car 54, Where Are You? And after it, he reinvented himself as a serious character actor in The Cotton Club, Fatal Attraction, and Pet Sematary. His last film role introduced him to a new generation, Judge Chamberlain Holler in My Cousin Vinny, sparring with Joe Pesci in a performance still quoted in courtrooms and comedy clubs alike. What most people don't know is that Gwynne was a Harvard graduate, a former president of the Harvard Lampoon, and the author and illustrator of 10 children's books. He was a painter and sculptor too. In his later years, he moved to a farm in nearby Taneytown, Maryland, wanting nothing more than peace and distance from Hollywood. He died there of pancreatic cancer on July 2nd, 1993, 8 days before his 67th birthday. His funeral was private, and his grave was left unmarked. Whether by his wishes or his family's, no one has ever said. The man who played one of television's most recognizable characters now rests in a place where you could stand directly over his grave and never know it. For our final stop, we return to Westwood Village Memorial Park. Beneath a large oak tree near the entrance, a small ground plaque reads, Burt Lancaster, 1913-1994. No title, no credits. For a man who spent 45 years commanding the screen with a physicality few actors have matched, the modesty is striking. Lancaster arrived in Hollywood almost by accident. He had been a circus acrobat in his youth and served in the army during World War II, entertaining troops with USO shows in Italy. The story goes that after the war, he shared an elevator with a theatrical producer who took one look at his athletic frame and assumed he must be an actor. A Broadway role followed, and his debut in the 1946 noir thriller The Killers made him a star overnight. From there, Lancaster took on an astonishing range of work. He was the passionate lover on the beach in From Here to Eternity, the charming con man in Elmer Gantry, which won him the Academy Award for Best Actor, and the imprisoned ornithologist in Birdman of Alcatraz. He produced Marty, which won the Best Picture Oscar in 1955. He played Doc Holliday in Gunfight at the OK Corral, and an aging small-time crook in Atlantic City, earning his 4th Oscar nomination. In 1963, he starred in Luchino Visconti's The Leopard, a film European critics still rank among the greatest ever made. His final memorable appearance came in Field of Dreams in 1989, playing the reclusive doctor, Moonlight Graham. A severe stroke in 1990 left him partially paralyzed for his final years. Lancaster died of a heart attack at his Century City apartment on October 20, 1994, at the age of 80. As he requested, there was no funeral. His body was cremated and his ashes placed beneath this oak tree, where the plaque sits level with the grass, easy to miss if you're not looking. And that's our tour. 10 actors, 10 lives, 10 resting places that the world has largely moved on from. But the films haven't moved on. The performances are still there, still playing, still waiting for someone to sit down and watch. Thanks for walking with us today.